tiny garage. Welcome back, everybody. This week we have something a little bit different. We have this 991 engine from a 2013 Carrera. It's a 3.4, very similar to the one in the car that we rebuilt, but it has a mystery ticking noise. And so the plan this week is to either see what's wrong with it so that we can fix it, or if it's like mush inside, then perhaps a coffee table. Does anyone need a coffee table? We're going to start off by just taking a whole bunch of pictures to record where we're at and kind of sort of see what we're dealing with. The first thing I did here was spun it around to take a look at the IMS. And any of you familiar with 996s and 997s and 986s, all of those freaky numbers, they will know that this should be an IMS right here, but on a 991, your IMS can't fail because there isn't one, which is probably a good thing. Well done, Porsche. Also, we'll see here the RMS is familiar, as is the snot coming out of it. So that's failed within 39,000 miles. Probably not a surprise to those of you familiar with these engines. But that's one thing that's very interesting. No IMS on a 991. What we can see up here though is the engine number, and that confirms that it's a 2013 3.4 litre 991 with 350 horsepower, though I suspect quite a few less horsepower right now. If we rotate it around to the front here, you can see it sort of looks familiar to the 996, but really it's quite different. There seems to be more plastic going on here, and this is probably something to do with the cooling system, perhaps something that goes to the heater in the car. And this looks plastic, but it is actually, that's a metal cover, it feels cold. That might be a scavenge pump perhaps. Although as we move on here, if we look on the top, there is no dipstick. We do have this area here that probably has a spout on it to fill the oil, but I guess on a 991 there is no physical dipstick. You just have some sensor that we will come across at some point. Another thing that I noticed is there is no fuel injection on the intake manifolds. They're going straight into the combustion chamber. So this 991 has direct injection, I believe, and that's going to be interesting to see how that's worked on the inside. In addition to that, I do see familiar things like the two NOx sensors are here. The oil filter is on top. That's a big difference, quite conventional in many ways. Then if we turn around to the side here, we notice on the 996 we had VarioCam. On the 997 they have VarioCam Plus, and then on this car they have something else again. I notice some connectors here in the head that are not on the 996, and then on the top here there appears to be maybe some sort of a solenoid, and so it would be fun to see what's inside and how they've updated the car since the 996. Starting off by taking out the spark plugs here, we're going to take a look inside. Now that we've got the spark plugs out, taking a look at them, I've got bank 1 in one hand and bank 2 in the other hand, and possibly bank 2 looks a little bit dirtier, but they're not too bad. So let's take a look inside and see if we do have any pistons left. Here is cylinder 1, and we'll notice some carbon buildup and a clean patch. I know that's not a very technical observation, but I'm just happy that there's pistons. Here's cylinder 2, which is slightly cleaner. Cylinder 3, which is less clean. Over to bank 2, which is a very similar story. Perhaps some of these variations will make sense once we see what's happened inside. For right now though, I'm just happy the pistons haven't beaten themselves to a pulp. So we have pistons. That's a good sign. They're not disintegrated into pieces. And so the next step then is to take a look at the oil. So we're going to drain the oil if there is any, and we're going to drop the oil pan. I scratched my head for a while trying to figure out the best way to get to this oil sump plug when we have this 500-pound engine sitting on top of it. And without putting it on an engine stand, which has its own complications, I was trying to figure out if this scissor lift could work. And lo and behold, it works really great and surprisingly stable, believe it or not. With it lifted up like that, it was easy just to get an Allen wrench on the drain plug. I was expecting the whole shebang, but as it turned out, there was just a dribble that came out. And I wanted to catch that initial dribble in a separate container, just because that would have the majority of the bits in it. Fastener-wise, whereas the 996 had a bunch of 10mm bolts, in this case, the majority of those 10mm have been replaced by a T30 Torx. And there we go, success. Now, the moment of truth, let's have a look. Remarkably sludgy in the bottom, so I just wanted to get a sample. Well, it does appear that we've found plenty of gold, though I suspect not the good kind. In case it's not obvious, there is a lot of that metal in the oil pan. So I'm going to clean it all out and have a look at it and see if we can figure out where it came from. Well, it turns out that there's a lot of metal in the oil pan. So something's going on in there. It doesn't seem like we're going to be rebuilding this engine anytime soon. And let me show you what I found. I collected a bunch and sort of cleaned it up a little bit. If you look at that, it's got a kind of copper tinge to it. It's quite some big bits, and it seems to be all magnetic. Oh dear. Well, that's an awful lot of shiny metallic metal in this 991 engine. And I'm wondering what it could be. What do you guys think it could be? Please put it in the comments if you have a prediction. My prediction, based on just how much of it there is, and it has that sort of copper tinge to it, I would say it's the main bearings. And the 996 had a reputation for spun bearings because of the conrod bolts stretching and then allowing that bearing to move. And so perhaps that's what's happened here. And then another thing too, if we're going to talk about predictions, these engines, or the 996 engines, have a reputation for the bank 2, cylinders 4, 5 and 6 kind of being the worst. And then I often see people talking about bore scoring or just bad things happening on cylinder 6 or 4, but cylinder 6 seems to be the main bad boy in this whole equation. And so I'm wondering if that is where we're going to find the problem. So let's have a look, see. We're going to strip it and we're going to start, based on what I'm thinking, we're going to start with bank 2 and see if something in there has disintegrated. Well, guess who decided she wanted to come out to the tiny garage? Hi, Delta. Hello. Just see your face, it's much prettier. I thought it was because she loved me, but then I remembered I had her treats in my pocket and she smelt them and was like, tap, tap, can I come in? Anyway, so let's do some tricks. This is why the treats are in my pocket. Come over here, horsey. Come on, Delta, come on, over. Okay, sit. Ooh, we're going to lay down. Can you crawl? What is that? Oh, you're going to stretch? Can you crawl? Can you crawl for everyone on YouTube? Come on, crawl. Ooh, okay, good enough for the garage, I suppose. Alright, the pièce de résistance for this dental toothbrush piece. Will you roll over? Come on, Delta. Come on, YouTubers watching. Roll over. Roll over, Delta. Roll over. Roll over. Roll over. Don't resist. I'll take it. Yay! Good girl. Our next mission is removing these 50 billion T30 Torx so we can get this cam cover off and have a look inside. I use my indispensable plastic trim tools there to wedge open the cam cover and encourage it to come off. The first thing I notice here is the cam cover has an actual fitted rubber gasket. No more gasket sealer. That makes me happy. Now that we have it open, we see cams as expected. That sensor on the outside now, I believe, is a cam position sensor for the intake cam. There was a couple of E8s holding this little sensor plug in, and after running the part number on it, it turns out that this is the variable valve timing solenoid. I gradually loosened each of the cam caps, starting on the outside and moving towards the center. Now that we're inside, we notice that the cam caps are held on with E10 external Torx. This large piece of metal has an integrated chain guide, which is Thankfully, a completely different design to the chain guides that failed on R996. Then just popping off the rest of those cam caps. I thought it would be a good idea to remove the scavenge pump just in case it's holding the exhaust cam on. But then when I removed the bolts, it spewed its guts all over the floor. So I picked up all the pieces to deal with later. And I do think it is a scavenge pump, but it's a very different design to the one that we found on the 996. I removed the last two cam caps in the hope that the cams would just come out, but they did not want to come out at all. Assuming that I'll have success, I don't want them to fall on the ground, and so I decided to zip tie them to the cylinder head just in case. This piece of black plastic was easy to wedge out with the trim tool, as was the remainder of that scavenge pump on the exhaust cam. I wanted to remove them just in case they're hindering our ability to remove the cams. With that in mind, I was then able to pull the base of that scavenge pump away from the exhaust cam, hopefully freeing it up. The chain is still so tight I can't get the cams out, and I noticed that this looks like a chain tensioner, so I'm going to remove it with this 17mm. So it was a chain tensioner and it kinda helped, but unfortunately not enough. With all the various pulling and pushing, this piece from the end of the exhaust cam came loose, so I was able to remove that. After struggling with these cams for a while and reading every forum post I could find, it seems that perhaps you're not able to take out the cams on a Porsche 991 engine unless you line that bank up to top dead center first. Now that doesn't work for us because I don't want to turn the engine because we have all of those pieces of metal in there. So instead, we're going to use Porsche's special tool FU101.
Don't you start 17.
Well, that worked quite well. And the cams just came straight out. They should put that in the Porsche manual. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time. Hold on, what's the dog doing? Oh yeah, subscribe now. Delta says thank you. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much. Let's go again. Okay. What have you got in there? This week, we found a bunch of metal in the oil pan. If you want to see that time we found a bunch of brown plastic, check out this video right here.